First contact, the unexpected architects. The research vessel Zephyr hung silently against the obsidian backdrop of space, its crystalline hull refracting distant starlight with an ethereal luminescence. Commander Arya Vox adjusted the neural interface of her observation station, her four-chambered heart beating with a measured rhythm of scientific anticipation. Anomalous transmission detected, chirped the ship's quantum communication array. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a transmission that defied every predictive model in the Galactic Research Consortium's archives. Aria's sensory tendrils, biological sensors far more sophisticated than traditional scanning equipment, trembled with intrigue. The transmission wasn't a standard communication protocol. It was chaotic, imperfect, yet undeniably intelligent. "Translate," she commanded. The ship's AI struggled momentarily, a rare occurrence that sent a ripple of concern through Aria's neural pathways. What emerged was less a translation and more a kaleidoscope of human ingenuity. Fragments of mathematical equations danced with mechanical schematics. Technical diagrams intertwined with what seemed like poetry, creative problem-solving encoded in a language that defied linear comprehension. The transmission originated from a small research outpost on the outer rim of the Kepler sector, a location marked as minimally significant in previous galactic surveys. Dr. Elena Rodriguez didn't know she was about to change everything. At that moment, she was wrestling with a malfunctioning atmospheric converter, a piece of equipment designed to transform the toxic atmosphere of their research planet into something breathable. Where a standard technician might have followed the manufacturer's repair manual, Elena saw an opportunity. The converter's primary cooling system had failed. Standard procedure would involve replacing the entire unit, a costly and time-consuming process that would leave the research team without critical life support for weeks. Elena saw something else: potential. Using components from a deprecated communication relay, she began reconstructing the converter's thermal management system. Her team watched, a mixture of skepticism and fascination etched across their faces. "This isn't in any manual," muttered her colleague, Dr. Marcus Chen. "Exactly," Elena responded, her fingers dancing across multiple interfaces. "Manuals are just suggestions. Innovation happens when you ignore the boundaries." Back on the Zephyr, Arya watched in astonishment. The human didn't just repair the machine, she was reimagining its entire operational framework. The repair wasn't linear, it was a three-dimensional solution that simultaneously addressed multiple system constraints. The transmission continued, revealing more than just a technical repair. It demonstrated a fundamental approach to problem-solving that was entirely alien to the Galactic Research Consortium's methodologies. Humans didn't see problems as obstacles. They saw them as opportunities for creative reconstruction. As Elena completed her modification, the atmospheric converter not only functioned but improved its efficiency by 37%. A system designed for one purpose had been transformed, its potential exponentially expanded by human creativity. Aria's research team had been studying humanity for decades, collecting data, analyzing patterns. But this single transmission revealed something profound: humans weren't just another species to be catalogued. They were architects of possibility. "Prepare a comprehensive analysis," Arya instructed her team. "But be warned, our previous models are about to become obsolete." The Zephyr's databases began processing the transmission, each algorithmic cycle revealing new layers of complexity. What had begun as a simple repair was now being recognized as a fundamental reimagining of technological potential. Humanity had just announced itself to the galaxy, not through grandiose declarations, but through an elegant solution to a mundane problem. First contact wasn't a moment of dramatic communication. It was a quiet revolution, encoded in the language of human creativity. The quantum paradox. 3 standard galactic cycles after the atmospheric converter incident, the research vessel Zephyr found itself confronting a scientific enigma that would challenge everything known about technological problem-solving. The quantum entanglement disruption, a phenomenon that had stymied the most advanced scientific minds across multiple civilizations, had become a critical research priority. Conventional approaches had failed repeatedly. Entire research teams from 17 different galactic species had submitted increasingly complex theoretical models, each more elaborate than the last, yet none could bridge the fundamental quantum communication breakdown. Commander Arya Vox reviewed the accumulated data, her neural interfaces pulsing with frustration. The problem seemed insurmountable. A quantum communication network was collapsing, creating potentially catastrophic communication gaps that could isolate entire star systems. Meanwhile, on the Human Research Station Horizon 9, Dr. Kamil Nowak approached the problem with an entirely different mindset. "We're thinking about this all wrong," he muttered, surrounded by a chaotic array of holographic projections, discarded coffee cups, and what appeared to be children's building blocks. His team exchanged concerned glances. Dr. Nowak had a reputation for unconventional methods, but this seemed to be pushing even his own boundaries of scientific exploration. The building blocks, simple, primary-colored plastic cubes, were arranged in what seemed to be a completely random pattern. Yet, as Nowak manipulated them, a complex geometric structure began to emerge. "Quantum communication isn't about perfect transmission," Nowak explained, more to himself than to his increasingly bewildered colleagues. "It's about adaptive resonance." Where other scientific teams had approached the problem with increasingly complex mathematical models and advanced quantum algorithms, Nowak was using a method that seemed almost childishly simple. He was treating the quantum communication network like a living, adaptive system, not a machine to be fixed, but an organism to be understood. The key insight came from an unexpected source, a seemingly unrelated study on ant colony communication patterns. Nowak had been reviewing the research during a late-night study session, his young daughter playing with building blocks nearby. The intersection of these two seemingly disparate fields sparked something revolutionary. Ants, he realized, maintained complex communication networks through simple, adaptive rules. Each individual ant didn't need to understand the entire system, they just needed to respond effectively to immediate local conditions. What if quantum communication could be approached the same way? As Nowak manipulated the blocks, he was actually modeling a new communication protocol. Each block represented a potential communication node, with its position and relationship to other blocks defining its communicative potential. On the Zephyr, Commander Arya Vox received the transmission with initial skepticism. The human research team was proposing something that seemed counterintuitive to every established scientific protocol. Instead of trying to create a perfect, centralized communication network, they suggested creating a decentralized, self-healing system. Each quantum node would have limited, but adaptive communication capabilities. If one node failed, surrounding nodes would automatically reconfigure, creating new communication pathways. It was elegant in its simplicity. And completely contrary to every existing scientific approach. The Galactic Research Consortium's initial response was dismissive. How could such a seemingly chaotic approach possibly work? But as they began to model Nowak's proposed system, something extraordinary happened. The simulation not only stabilized the quantum communication network, it made it more robust than any previous design. Arya watched in astonishment as the holographic representation of the quantum network transformed. Where previous models showed rigid, hierarchical structures, this new approach created a living, breathing communication ecosystem. The breakthrough wasn't just a technical solution. It was a fundamental reimagining of how complex systems could communicate and adapt. Humans, once again, had demonstrated their unique ability to see beyond established boundaries. They didn't just solve problems, they redefined the very nature of problem solving. As the first successful quantum communication tests began, Commander Arya Vox understood that humanity was not just another species to be studied. They were architects of a new way of thinking, unpredictable, innovative, and astonishingly brilliant. Survival beyond limitations. The planet Xerxes 9 was nothing short of a nightmare, a world of perpetual storms, corrosive atmospheric conditions, and environmental challenges that would have broken lesser species within hours. Its surface was a maelstrom of razor-sharp crystalline formations, winds that could shred metal, and temperature fluctuations that defied conventional survival metrics. When the joint research expedition found itself stranded, most alien species would have immediately initiated emergency extraction protocols. The human team, led by Captain Aria Santiago, saw something entirely different, a challenge to be conquered. "We're not waiting for rescue," Captain Santiago announced to her mixed team of human and alien researchers. Her voice was calm, her eyes scanning the hostile landscape with a predator's intensity. "We're going to survive." The alien members of the expedition, representatives from 3 different galactic species, looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and growing curiosity. Commander Zara K of the Luminarian delegation spoke first, her translucent exoskeleton shifting with nervous energy. "The environmental readings are fatal," she stated. "Survival duration is mathematically impossible." Santiago just smiled. The team's first priority was shelter. Where conventional survival protocols would suggest finding or constructing a protective structure, Santiago took a different approach. Using the wreckage of their damaged research vessel, she began a process of adaptive reconstruction that left the alien team stunned. Pieces of advanced technological equipment were stripped, repurposed, and integrated into a living shelter that could not just withstand the planet's brutal conditions but actually leverage them. Solar radiation that would normally destroy equipment was now being converted into energy. Crystalline formations that created deadly wind patterns were redirected to create protective wind barriers. Dr. Marcus Chen, the team's environmental engineer, worked alongside Santiago. Together, they transformed mathematical impossibility into practical survival. "We're not fighting the environment," Chen explained to the bewildered alien researchers. "We're negotiating with it." Their shelter wasn't just a place of protection, it was a living system that adapted moment by moment. Sensors developed by Chen could predict storm patterns, allowing the structure to modify its configuration milliseconds before a potential breach. The Luminarian commander Zara K watched in absolute fascination. Her species had extensive survival databases, complex technological solutions that spanned millennia of evolutionary development. Yet here were these humans, with limited technological resources, creating a survival solution that defied all established scientific understanding. Water became their next critical challenge. Xerxes 9's liquid resources were highly acidic, contaminated with mineral compositions that would destroy standard filtration systems. Where other species would have considered the situation hopeless, the human team saw an opportunity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, who had previously reimagined the atmospheric converter, now turned her attention to water survival. Using a combination of biological mimicry and improvised technology, she developed a filtration system inspired by the root structures of desert plants and the kidney functions of extremophile organisms. "Survival isn't about having the perfect solution," Rodriguez explained. "It's about being willing to learn from everything around you." Days turned into weeks. The alien researchers began to document everything, their initial skepticism transforming into pure scientific wonder. The humans weren't just surviving, they were thriving. Commander Zara K approached Captain Santiago during a particularly violent storm cycle. The shelter's adaptive systems were redirecting wind forces, creating a bubble of calm amidst environmental chaos. "How?" Zara K asked, her universal translator struggling to capture the complexity of her emotional state. "How do you see opportunity where others see certain destruction?" Santiago's response was simple yet profound. "We don't see obstacles. We see puzzles waiting to be solved." As rescue ships finally approached Xerxes, 9 weeks later, they found not a group of survivors, but a fully functional research station. The humans had not just survived, they had begun to understand the planet's ecosystem in ways no previous expedition had achieved. The Galactic Research Consortium would spend years studying this expedition, trying to understand the unique human capacity for adaptive survival. But for Captain Santiago and her team, it was just another day of solving the unsolvable. Humanity had once again rewritten the rules of possibility. The diplomatic cipher. The Galactic Concordance Chamber was a monument to bureaucratic complexity, a massive, multidimensional negotiation space where 12 distinct galactic civilizations had been deadlocked for 247 standard cycles. The conflict centered on the resource-rich Nexus Corridor, a strategic interstellar region whose ownership had become a powder keg of diplomatic tension. Previous negotiations had been exercises in futility. Elaborate communication protocols, centuries of diplomatic records, and complex legal frameworks had only served to entrench each civilization's position. The situation seemed hopelessly gridlocked. Enter Dr. Amara Okonkwo. At first glance, she seemed an unlikely diplomatic savior. A cultural anthropologist with a background in conflict resolution, Amara approached the diplomatic impasse with a perspective that was distinctly, definitively human. Where other diplomatic teams arrived with volumes of legal documentation and intricate position papers, Amara brought something entirely different, a deep understanding of human storytelling. Diplomacy isn't about winning, she had told her team before entering the Concordance Chamber. It's about finding a narrative that everyone can see themselves in. The chamber itself was a marvel of technological complexity. Holographic interfaces translated multiple linguistic and telepathic communication modes simultaneously. Representatives from 12 different species sat in a circular arrangement, each protected by layers of translation technology and defensive communication barriers. Amara's approach was radical. Instead of presenting legal arguments or economic proposals, she began to tell a story. It wasn't a story about the Nexus Corridor. It wasn't about resources or territorial claims. It was a narrative about a small fishing village from Earth's past, a community that had faced an impossible environmental challenge. The story detailed how this village, facing potential destruction from changing sea levels, didn't fight against the environment. Instead, they reimagined their entire way of living. They didn't just adapt, they transformed. As she spoke, something extraordinary happened. The translation interfaces began to struggle, not because of technical limitations, but because they were capturing something beyond mere words. They were translating emotion, perspective, collective problem-solving. The Luminarian representative, Commander Zarake, who had previously witnessed human survival on Xerxes 9, leaned forward. The Quantum Collective's representative adjusted their holographic form. The Silicon Consciousness shifted its computational matrices. They were listening. Really listening. Amara wasn't presenting a solution. She was offering a perspective, a way of seeing the conflict that transcended individual territorial claims. She was showing them a different way of understanding collective survival. The Nexus Corridor isn't a prize to be claimed, she explained. It's a shared opportunity for collective growth. Her story revealed how the village had transformed their challenge into an opportunity for innovation. They hadn't just survived, they had created an entirely new model of community resilience. The diplomatic representatives began to see the Nexus Corridor differently. It wasn't a resource to be conquered, but a space of potential collaboration. Each civilization could contribute something unique. Each could benefit in ways they hadn't previously imagined. Hours turned into days. The traditional diplomatic protocols dissolved. What emerged was something entirely new, a collaborative framework that saw the corridor as a shared ecosystem of innovation rather than a territorial battleground. Commander Zarake would later describe it as the most human solution possible, a resolution that didn't just solve the immediate conflict but reimagined the entire concept of interspecies cooperation. When the final agreement was reached, it wasn't signed with traditional legal documents. Instead, each civilization contributed a piece of their cultural narrative, a living document that represented collective potential. Dr. Amara Okonkwo had done what centuries of diplomatic efforts had failed to achieve. She had transformed a potential interstellar conflict into an opportunity for collective growth. The galactic concordance would never be the same. Humanity had once again demonstrated its most profound capability, the ability to see beyond existing boundaries, to find connection where others saw only division. The evolutionary leap. The Galactic Archive was more than a repository of knowledge, it was the collective memory of civilization itself. Situated at the heart of the quantum nexus, it contained the accumulated wisdom of thousands of species spanning millions of years of recorded history. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at its crystalline entrance, surrounded by a delegation that represented the most advanced civilizations in the known universe. This was to be humanity's final presentation, a culmination of everything they had demonstrated through their previous encounters. Commander Arya Vox, who had first observed humanity's unique problem-solving capabilities, watched with anticipation. The Luminarian, the Quantum Collective, the Silicon Consciousness, all waited to understand the true nature of human potential. What Rodriguez was about to reveal was nothing short of revolutionary. Humanity's greatest strength, she began, is not our technology. It's not our intelligence. It's our capacity for collective imagination. The presentation unfolded not as a scientific lecture, but as a living demonstration of human cognitive evolution. Rodriguez didn't just show data, she revealed a new way of understanding intelligence itself. Using a breakthrough neural mapping technology, she demonstrated how human consciousness worked fundamentally differently from other known species. Where most civilizations saw intelligence as a linear, hierarchical process, human cognition was more like a dynamic, adaptive ecosystem. Individual human minds didn't just process information, they cross-pollinated ideas, created unexpected connections, and transformed challenges into opportunities with remarkable fluidity. The neural map she presented was a masterpiece of complexity. It showed how human brains didn't just think, they dreamed, they imagined, they reimagined entire possibilities in milliseconds. Each neural pathway was not a fixed route but a living, breathing network of potential. Memories weren't static recordings but dynamic constructs that could be reinterpreted, reconstructed, reimagined. We are not defined by what we know, Rodriguez explained. We are defined by our capacity to not know, and to be comfortable with that uncertainty. The delegation watched in stunned silence. She demonstrated how human innovation emerged from the spaces between knowledge, from curiosity, from the willingness to embrace failure as a critical part of learning. Where other species saw obstacles, humans saw puzzles. Where others saw limits, humans saw horizons. The neural mapping showed something extraordinary: human intelligence was fundamentally collaborative. Individual minds didn't just think, they participated in a collective cognitive dance, sharing insights, challenging assumptions, creating something greater than any single perspective. Commander Zarake of the Luminarians finally understood. Humanity wasn't just another species to be studied. They were architects of a new form of intelligence, adaptive, collaborative, endlessly creative. The presentation culminated in a living demonstration. Rodriguez invited representatives from different species to participate in a collective problem-solving exercise. What emerged was not a solution created by any single mind, but a collaborative masterpiece that transcended individual limitations. "We are not trying to be the most intelligent species," Rodriguez said in her closing remarks. "We are trying to be the most adaptable. Intelligence is not about having the right answers. It's about being willing to ask the right questions." The Galactic Archive would later mark this moment as a turning point, the moment humanity was truly recognized not as a species to be studied, but as collaborators in the grand cosmic narrative of discovery. As the presentation concluded, something shifted in the collective consciousness of the gathered civilizations. They were no longer looking at humans as a curiosity. They were seeing them as partners, as fellow explorers in the vast, unknown territories of possibility. Humanity had done more than prove its worth. They had redefined the very concept of intelligence itself. The evolutionary leap was complete.